Hi everyone, I'm Just a Bug and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the basics of using a wakizashi. Alright, so this is a wakizashi. It's a one-handed Japanese sword with a blade length between 30 and 60 centimeters, but most of them usually sit between 50 and 55. This one here has a blade length of 55 centimeters. Now, it's a one-handed sword usually, but it does have enough space so that if you really want, you can fit two hands on it. And you see me do that in some of my cutting videos. Now, the difference between this and a Western sword that's one-handed is obviously blade length is quite a bit shorter. And also, if you look here, it's balanced slightly more forward because it's designed to have the weight for cutting. So it doesn't quite have the maneuverability of a Western sword, but it does pack a little bit more punch for its size. Now people ask, why would you use a wakizashi with a shorter blade length when you've got a Western sword that's one-handed that has a longer blade length? And there's not really a fantastic answer for that. Japanese people tended to prefer shorter blade lengths because of their steel quality. But another good reason to use one is because if you're indoors, then a much longer sword can get stuck in walls, in corridors, whereas this one has a little bit more maneuverability and you're not as restricted indoors with this. Another reason for using a one-handed sword rather than a two-handed sword is that you can have a free hand to do something. You can have a shield, another sword, you see that in Niten-ryu, or also in the Korean form Sangum, and it just gives you a little bit more freedom. It doesn't have quite as much power and speed, but you've got a shield for defense or another sword for anything else you want to do. Alright, before you start cutting anything with your wakizashi, always make sure that you're safe. I can't stress this enough. Alcohol and emotions don't go well with swords, not even one drink. Another thing that you have to be careful of is your surroundings and other people. So what you should do is you get your wakizashi, hold it by the bottom of the handle, and stick it out in front, to the side, behind, to the other side. If there's anyone within that radius, they've really got to move because there's a possibility of them getting hurt. Another thing to take note of is ceilings. So if you can touch the ceiling with the tip of the blade, when you're holding it at the end, there still is a possibility of cutting your ceiling, and that's not great for anyone. So I recommend that if that's the case, you go outside or you find a different place to practice cutting. Alrighty, so with the wakizashi, then I like to have it on the hip. And some people ask, why is the blade up? Because in movies you often see it with the blade down. Now this is the thing, because from the hip, when you're drawing from the hip, then you've got a little bit more control, it's not moving as much, and blade down is really only a thing when it's hanging from the thigh, so if you've got the movement, just draw it from there. Normally they have cords there to hold it, and that means that it swings around, moves around. It's a little bit more annoying, so I prefer it on the hip. Now when unsheathing, then have your right hand on the blade and your left hand behind the mouth of the sheath. This is really important because if your hand is behind the mouth, then you can't get cut. And keep the webbing on the top behind, like on the wood. The reason for that is because you obviously don't want to cut the webbing of your hand. Now thumb goes to the right of the blade and it just pushes till it's unclipped. After it's unclipped, then pull the sheath back and draw the blade out in a smooth motion so that there's no back and forth and you can't hurt yourself. When cutting with a blade, there's two things that you really need to be mindful of. That's edge alignment and slicing. So with the first one, edge alignment, then what that means is that I'm cutting in the same direction as my edge. So if I'm cutting downwards, that means my edge has to be pointing downwards as well. An obvious example of not doing this is if you slap with the side of your sword, you're obviously not going to cut. Now that's a pretty extreme example, but edge alignment, especially when doing cuts like this, then they can be slightly tweaked. And if you're off by even just 15 degrees, then you change your cutting angle quite drastically. So my wakizashi has a cutting angle of 30 degrees, and if you're off by 15 degrees, then the cutting edge suddenly becomes 60 degrees. Now edge alignment, then you can overcome this by having a sharper sword, and that gives you a little bit more forgiveness when using improper edge alignment. But a sharper sword isn't necessarily always a good thing. You can have a too sharp sword. The reason why swords aren't razor sharp is because then you've got a thinner piece of metal, and when you contact hard objects or other swords, that piece of metal can fragment, or it can roll, or it can chip, and it's not great for your sword. A lot of swords actually have a thing called mate or niku, which is where the cutting blade of the sword has a little bit of a roundness to it, and it slightly widens the cutting angle, but what that does is it means that the sword is a little bit more durable. Alright, so the second thing is slicing. Now there's two ways to cut. I call them slicing and hacking. So slicing is what you want to do, and that's where with the blade, when you cut through, you slightly pull it through your target. And what that does is it means that instead of having from the edge to the end of the cutting edge, instead of having 2 centimeters, then you extend that edge and you get maybe 20 centimeters across, and that drastically improves the cutting angle. So you go from it being 30 degrees to a much smaller angle. Now in contrast to that, then there's hacking, which is where from here, rather than making a nice slice, I just whack it through. And if you've got a sharp enough sword, heavy enough sword, or just enough power in your arm, then it is possible to cut through. And I'll admit that you see me do that in some of my videos when I get a little bit frustrated because I can't cut through a target. But it's not great form, it doesn't make it easier, and you don't really leave clean cuts. So making sure that you pull through the target so that you extend that cutting edge and you can make a nice clean cut through your target is essential, and keep that in mind from getting good form. Now this happens for all your cuts, not just this one, from here as well, and from here, and it's all got to pull from the body so that you extend that cutting edge. Alright, so with resheathing the blade, then there's a few different ways to do it. This is just my personal method. Now some people like to make a mouth with their hand past the sheath, with the whole hand past the mouth of the sheath, and slide along that way. I don't really like that because the thought of the webbing of my hand being past the wood doesn't sit right. I like to keep it out of the way of the blade. So I keep it in the same position as where I started to draw the sword from, and I grip the sword between the pad of my thumb and the first knuckle of my index finger. And after I do that, then I just slide the blade down until the tip of the blade is past the opening of the sheath. That way then I can just rock the blade backwards until it's straight, and then just slide the blade into its sheath. Now with drawing and resheathing, always keep traction on the bottom of the blade, the spine of it. The reason for that being, you've got a sharp edge on this side. A sharp sword can cut through your sheath, can damage your sheath in a lot of ways and make it loose, so your blade can slide out when you don't want it to, and that's not really safe. Thanks for watching my video. Now, if you're interested in this and you haven't tried it, I recommend that you get a bokken. That's a wooden sword. I picked this one off eBay for about 20 bucks, and it's a nice hardwood blade. It's got similar proportions to my actual blade, and train with this until you feel comfortable before using an actual live blade. There are also unsharpened metal blades, which are a pretty good alternative because it gives you the weight and also the distribution of the weight on the sword, whereas this wooden one doesn't quite do that. But they're a little bit more expensive, but it is quite a good cutting option. It is quite a good training option, and you can't really hurt yourself with it. This one also, I've been notoriously bad for trying out new moves and hurting myself by hitting myself in the leg or on the back of the head. And it's really good to try it out with this one and not this one, because this one would leave me with more than just a bruise. So I highly recommend that you go out, try something new if you're interested. I mean, it doesn't cost much and you have a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.